Well, as part of all of this at UNISA, you saw the strong promise by the Higher Education Minister, Nzimande, yesterday, that he'll get to the problems, at the bottom of the problems at UNISA. Other institutions around the country, you've seen claims of maladministration and at times almost chaos in some higher education institutions. Perhaps the situation at the University of Fort Hare has been the worst. People have been killed for investigating tenders. But many of these institutions also say government shouldn't interfere in how universities are run because they must have academic freedom and they must have the right to manage themselves. Professor Francis Petersen is the Vice-Chancellor and Principal of the University of the Free State. Professor Petersen, good afternoon to you and thank you for your time. Why do you believe our universities should be allowed to govern themselves, able to run themselves?
Good afternoon, Stephen, and good afternoon to the viewers. We use the term institutional autonomy, and there are two, I would say, great values of higher education institutions, or higher education in general, and that is academic freedom on the one hand, and institutional autonomy. Institutional autonomy talk about self-regulation, self-governance, and I think the important thing there is it fosters a level of democracy and participation, if you really want to drill it down. It allows institutions to select the programs that they want to offer. It allows institutions to be able to say, well, this is the allocation of finances to the different priorities in the institution. And those contexts can differ from institution to institution and from geography to geography. I think it's important to realize that when you have that sort of self-regulation and self-governance, that it comes with a very, very high level of regulatory framework. And that regulatory framework is within the institution, is made up of stakeholders of the institutions, the students, the staff, alumni, and it's come in the form of strong councils, hopefully, through strong senates, and other systems that the university built. And for me, it is that level of freedom that university have to exercise the decision in terms of what they believe society should look like, what our children and grandchildren should be exposed to, and not to be necessarily interfere what other people, specifically governments, think what society or what things need to be taught. And I think there is where your institutional autonomy comes in. But I want to make the point, Stephen and the viewers, that institutional autonomy and academic freedom does not come without responsibility and accountability.
So I hear you, and I mean, I'm sure you could make an argument that no one wants a politician to decide what people are thinking or studying, and you would probably get quite some support with that, Professor. But does the fact that universities and higher education institutions are managed in this way strengthen the chances, increase the chances that it is possible for people to indulge in corruption or to steal money for themselves? And is that something we need to worry about? That, while I accept what you say, it also has a consequence of raising the chances that there'll be some kind of freedom to indulge in corruption?
Yeah, that chance will always be there. But I think if your regulatory framework and your governance framework is very, very strong, as I've indicated, if you have strong councils that consist of members that understand what governance is about and understand what accountability and responsibility is about, and an understanding of what higher education is about, then that council need to play a role, and that council need to ensure that the leadership of that institution is held accountable if there are any particular issues. It's the same that you would find in a business. I would imagine that your shareholders would elect members on the board to ensure that they execute and that they ensure that accountability and the responsibility of the leadership of that company is intact. So for me, it is not necessarily about the apparent freedom that the institution has. It is about to what extent is that freedom being governed properly. And I think if you make that statement in terms of what is the chances, the probability, it will always be there. If you got weak councils, if you got weak systems in your institution, that doesn't protect that. If your systems, like for instance, we talked about earlier about the Council of Higher Education, that look at the quality of the programs. You have other statutory quality bodies like the Engineering Council of South Africa, and all of those need to play their role. And if they are properly constituted by quality individuals, then I think that risk that you just talked about, Stephen, is actually quite small.
So at what point should anyone be able to step in, or should government never be able to step in?
No, surely. Part of that regulatory framework does include government. The Department of Higher Education and Training, we need to provide reports to the Department of Higher Education and Training. Annual reports goes to the Department of Higher Education and Training. There's the Parliament Portfolio Committee that also provide oversight. And because universities are public institutions, they actually, to a certain extent, are social institutions. They have to ensure that they have that social legitimacy so the public can ask any question. And if we believe, the public believe, that there is a challenge at the institution, the public through the Department of Higher Education and Training in themselves could challenge that. So when the Department of Higher Education and Training, as the government custodian of the public good perspective, if they feel and if they see that this particular regulatory framework and governance framework in this particular institution is not working, then they can come in, and they should come in to ensure that there is a really benefit that flows to the public at the end.
Professor, we've seen so many problems at so many higher education institutions, and I mean, on one level you could probably say, look, that it reflects some of the problems in our society. Maybe that's true. But I also wonder about the structure. So, I mean, you have councils and convocations and senates. I mean, I know very little about higher education, and I get confused with all of the terms. Do we need to change the structure? Are some of the problems we're seeing the result of structure, or is it just the result of the people or personalities or other forces, other tensions, rather, that are at play?
So, Stephen, to respond to that question, institutions always have to evolve. We can't just stay the same, and so is structure. So I'm not necessarily suggesting that the structure shouldn't change, and we always have to look at that. We have the sort of a cooperative type of governance in the higher education institution, which is not co-managing, but is cooperative, and those things need to be reviewed on a regular basis. So I would be the first person to say that we shouldn't just assume and accept that the structure should be there forever. But you could have the most perfect structure if the people that occupy that structure hasn't got the appropriate competence, haven't got the ethical and moral attributes that comes with it and that should come with it, is not accountable or responsible, or not held accountable or responsible, then that structure is going to fail. So I would say, yes, let's look at how the structure can evolve, and we need to modernize. But for me, the important thing is to what extent is the people that occupy that structure exhibiting the type of qualities that we would expect them to have.
Professor Francis Petersen, thank you. Vice-Chancellor Principal of the University of the Free State. Really appreciate the time on Newsfeed.